I saw the best minds of my generation destroyed by madness, starving, hysterical, naked, dragging themselves through the Negro streets at dawn looking for an angry fix.
The Beat movement, where Beat poets transformed literature by rejecting conventionalism and mainstream American values, occurred in San Francisco in the 1950s. During this time, America had reaffirmed its traditional societal roles as a response to the end of World War II, and Beat poets sought to challenge those values. The Beat movement was a turning point for American culture, as poets published literature that involved expression, spiritual and sexual liberation, and freedom that would construct a counterculture America. When the Beat movement became prominent, the United States was in a post-World War II era. Following the war, an economic boom broke out which brought the country economic prosperity to a majority of Americans. By then, conformity was embedded in American social and cultural life and was reinforced through religious faith, patriotism, and traditional values. During the war, gender roles were blurred because while most men were away on the field, wartime economy modified the woman's role. Job opportunities for women involved heavy industry-based workspaces, including jobs that serviced wartime production that previously belonged to men. After the return of soldiers and men following the war, there was a reemergence of traditional roles in American society. And in the 1950s, both men and women felt the shift to strict gender roles in their daily life once more.
It's just new and exciting. There's a lot of ads in the paper.
Lucy!
Yeah, look, here's one right here.
As much as the average citizen adhered to the reaffirmed roles, this was a cause for the rebellious actions taken by the Beat generation, and soon others would follow alongside the defiant movement that would alter American culture. This shift with rejecting normality in American culture led to rebellious movements that were shown in music, attitudes, and more prominently, the Beat poetry and literary movement. Alongside the Beat movement, rock music emerged in the mid-50s with the reputable Elvis Presley being named King of Rock. This shift in music aided the adapting American culture. The exposure of unconventional ideas spread even before the 1950s, but as well as the 1940s.
Back in the 50s and
40s.
It started in the 40s.
Yeah, it's 50th anniversary this year, actually.
Allen Ginsberg, a man who lived vibrantly and one who constructed ideas for a new generation with his fellow exuberant poets, changed America. Ginsberg was born in Newark, New Jersey on June 3, 1926. His father, Lewis, was a poet, and his mother, Naomi, suffered from mental illnesses that would impact Allen throughout his life. He enrolled in Columbia University in the fall of 1943, a young man in his late teens, unsure at the time just how much he would impact America. During the Christmas of 1944, his fellow undergraduate, Lucien Carr, introduced the 18-year-old Allen to both William Burroughs and, of course, Jack Kerouac. In a defiant response to their teacher's idealistic formal views on education and literature, Carr and Ginsberg believed that a new vision was needed to sculpt a new America. And sculpt they did. This was the start of cultivating a literature renaissance for American culture.
What about Yeats? The new vision.
You're hired.
Around the mid-50s, rock music made an entrance in the ever-changing American culture. Musicians like Ray Charles, Buddy Holly, and Elvis Presley aided the rebellious culture movement. With music, poetry, and styles, the Beat movement inspired groups of people to reject the formality of the social, cultural, and even political aspects of the United States. Not only did rock music correlate with the rejection of conformity, but as well as the emergence of gay liberation that specifically struck San Francisco. This is where the Beat poets and pursuit of gay rights overlapped. These ideas only built the impact of the Beat movement on America and the turning point of its culture. The followers of the Beat movement initiated a social change, challenging societal norms and conventional writing, as well as changed how average citizens viewed art and literature. A movement that chiseled the change of poetry, drifting away from the formality of literary conformity. With the main group of poets meeting in Christmas of 1944, more of the youth would follow in their footsteps. Poets like Neal Cassady. Neal Cassady met Ginsberg in 1947 and became somewhat of his muse. He would even inspire Jack Kerouac to write the awe-inspiring novel On the Road. In 1948, Jack Kerouac coined the term Beat to describe the nonconformist youth movement happening in New York at the time. The term Beat would be heard for decades that followed. In actuality, Herbert Hunk was credited for first using the term, but Kerouac defined beat as meaning upbeat, beatific, and on the beat. which contrasted Hunk's idea of beat meaning someone who is tired or beat to his socks, an exact opposite to Kerouac's version of the expression. A year later, in 1949, Allen Ginsberg, who is known for being very open to the idea of illicit and illegal drugs, was arrested for possessing stolen goods and the drug marijuana. The beat poets, known for rejecting traditionalism in American society, were also known for being adamant on their stance on making drugs legal. Many thought it to enhance creativity, but for some, it led them down a darker path. For instance, William Burroughs, who struggled with his addiction and was known for his dramatic stance on drug culture. Because of the illegal tendencies Ginsberg took with drugs, he was arrested in Manhattan and was placed in a mental institution after pleading insanity in a hearing. Through his convalescence, he met influential beat poet Carl Solomon. Ginsberg dedicated his most famous poem Howl to Solomon. Historians say it may as well have been a manifesto for the beat movement. The poem Howl embodied the rebellious aspect of beat life, a poem that emphasized the nature and life of beat poets, encompassed sexual liberation and the pain and productivity of the beat generation. Through his writing, he expressed the unorganized thought and structureless poetry that the beat poets strived for. This poem would be a major turning point for the beat movement and censorship for America. Howl challenged American laws of obscenity and critiqued American government systems. Publishing Howl and other poems in 1956 actually got Ginsberg arrested with a court case that would follow. His trial in 1957 would challenge the poem for its obscenity, vulgar language, abrupt literary show of illicit drugs, and homosexuality. Looking to ban and censor the book, 520 copies were impounded in London in March of 1957 by San Francisco customs collectors. Eventually, the poem was deemed not obscene and Judge Clayton W. Horne dismissed the case, and that Howl was not without redeeming social importance. As well as saying the poems published did not have a considerable quality to corrupt the mind with lascivious thoughts or arousing lustful desire. But even if the book was censored, it could not have erased the importance that the beat movement presented. And it was at the reading of Howl at the Sixth Gallery in San Francisco on October 7, 1955, when no American could reverse the effects of the beat movement, for it was now irrevocable. A moment captured in a vibrant hue, that somehow picturesque history that would paint poetry in new transcendent color. The way citizens of America viewed art and literature changed with the beat movement. The beat movement challenged the conservative structural aspects of poetry and opened a new world for experimental and abstract forms of writing. Throughout the impactful years of the beat movement, poetry would also come to challenge censorship in America, as well as impacting American culture and foundation of the hippie movements and counterculture movements of the 60s. With the counterculture movement, the new generation of beatniks lived alongside the hippies and fought against American consumerism as well as practiced radical politics while challenging anti-civil rights movements and were very much anti-war. They expressed this through multiple protests in the late 60s, early 70s. During the beat movement, the subject of gay rights was also changing. Gay bar subculture and homophile activist movements would emerge more freely because their ideas overlapped with the beat intentions regarding rebellion and rejection of conservatism. The immediate impacts to the beat movement was crucial for the change that America endured, ones that we still feel today in literature, movements involving civil and gay rights, and the rejection of conservative culture. The writing style that stemmed from the beat movement still impacts American literature today. The writing challenged conservative America, and because of that, it would change the status quo of writing. According to Ginsberg, authors like Henry Miller were censored, as well as classics like Catullus or Petronius had to be printed in Latin. Books today are prone to ideas involving expression of self, as well as contain themes of sexual liberation and freedom. The free expression movements from the Beat generation impacted greatly on expressive sexuality, expressive poetry, and impacted civil rights and counterculture movements. Today, these concepts are felt in forms of sexual liberation, spiritual exploration, rejection of conformity and traditionalism, and explored creativeness of fine arts and liberal arts. Through these concepts, the Beat generation is still felt in the modern world.
And continue your celebration. Hey, Father Death, I'm flying home. Hey, poor man, you're all alone. Hey, old daddy, I know where I'm going.